Now, an independent advisor has claimed pro-Palestinian protests are turning London into a no-go zone for Jews.
Well, joining us now is a Conservative MP Paul Scully. Paul, I'm so glad you're here today because can I just say, when you made your comments that you got lambasted for, I was there giving you a round of applause saying thank you for speaking out on behalf of something that a lot of people can see happening. Do you feel slightly vindicated now, having the Commissioner of counter-extremism basically saying you were right?
Well, look, what I was frustrated about over that week, and I apologised actually for the term, and I've explained why. It's not because it distracted from the conversation, as you rightly say, we absolutely have to have. There are plenty of people in plenty of parts of the country that feel uncomfortable in going into some areas. That may be a Muslim going into a different part of their city. It might be someone else going into a Muslim area. It might be a white person going into a black area. What Robin was talking about, the advisor was talking about, is if you imagine being a Jewish member of the Jewish community around London that are stepping into some of those protests, how uncomfortable you must feel. If you were a gay person walking around some parts of the country wanting to hold hands with your partner, you will feel uncomfortable. Until we understand what is feeding that, then that none of this is progressing, getting us anywhere.
I think, Paul, that your situation in this saga crystallises our national problem, that we have some kind of terror about confronting the truth about what is going on. Now, Robin Simcox isn't any old Joe Soap. He's a Home Office Commissioner, an expert on extremism. He says there are no-go areas for Jews around London, which is pretty much what you said. London and Birmingham, you said, and you sort of had to apologise because all these... What on earth is Mr Scully talking about? What do you mean there are no-go areas for Jews in Birmingham? Well, the truth is there are. And yet, when someone like yourself has the guts and the temerity to say so, you are shut down. So this is what we do. We shut down discussion about something that is very important. And may I say so, I've got to say this, Paul, I don't think you should have apologised.
No, I don't think you should.
Well, the reason I apologise, as I say, because the term itself, no-go areas, means different things to different people. I think we are using it in this context in the way that I actually meant it. People feeling very uncomfortable about going into some areas. That's different from the way some people had interpreted it. So there were people that were genuinely triggered, upset, offended. There are plenty of people, though, that layer a political confection of anger on top of that to do exactly as you say and shut down those sort of discussions. And so between all of that, we just don't talk about these sort of things. And so if you just sit there, everything's rosy, you never get on with anything.
Right, I'm not sure, actually, that you're right on something, which is I'm not sure there are lots of people out there who would have been triggered or offended by what you said at all. I think it's one person who doesn't want to have the conversation, who tells the rest of the world that they should be offended by something, essentially to censor this conversation. And this is the problem. I think people willfully misinterpret things that people say, because I think most people sitting in this country listening to you, unless they really wanted to deliberately misinterpret what you said and be offended by it, knew exactly what you were saying and agreed with you.
Well, look, that may or may not be. I don't know in terms of how many people would have been offended and these kind of things. The irony was I was actually doing that interview to condemn the choice of words that Lee Anderson made, and saying that he was pointedly saying those things because the mayor is Muslim, and it was just really totally inappropriate. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have this conversation, because those kind of populist remarks are fueled by the lack of a conversation. Because if everyone, as I say, says, you know what, no, my place is absolutely perfect, there's nothing to see here, then everyone can see through that. So we need to have a constructive conversation, not shut people down.
It was just the tone of the people that criticised you, Paul, as in, what on earth is he talking about? I mean, we all knew what you were talking about, and this is the whole problem. And by the way, the problem with Lee Anderson is, far be it from me to defend Sadiq Khan, but what Lee Anderson said about the London mayor simply was not true. That was the problem. Yeah. What you said was true. What do you think about Robin Simcox blaming this situation on the fact that, this is what he wrote in the Telegraph today, he said that extremist groups have gone unchallenged for too long. And what he's talking about, you know, if you think about these pro-Palestinian marches as they go through the town, I've seen them, I've gone to see them myself. They're breaking the law, loads of them are breaking the law on a serial basis, chanting for genocide, jihad, from the river to the sea, and the police just stand there and look at them. You project a song of genocide onto the side of the Houses of Parliament, and the police do nothing. That's what Mr Simcox is talking about. Do you agree that it is time to challenge these extremists, not let them just get away with it and carry on?
Yeah, well, look, to your first point, no, social media perpetuates all of this sort of stuff because everyone's, you know, in the moment. And the media, some parts of the media were saying, look, I tell you what, why don't you come into Tower Hamlets? Why don't you come into Sparkhill and we'll show you how lovely it is? Well, I've been to those areas and I'm happily walking around those areas. You actually need to go outside. It's more meaningful to go outside and ask people why they might feel uncomfortable. Then you can have a conversation. With regard to what you're saying that Robin Simcox said, look, there are people that are undoubtedly agitating in every protest, but especially at the moment in the protests that we're seeing week in, week out. And we've seen some groups chanting jihad when they clearly don't mean the mental struggle, they're meaning more than that. We see some of the hate speech that we're seeing in some in and around some mosques of years gone by, that if that's been allowed to ferment because we're not challenging it as robustly as we might, then it's hardly surprising that people are reading the headlines and again building up the kind of prejudices that cause this kind of debate.
I just want to opportunistically bring in Peter Blexley because we've got him sitting with us right now to talk more on this subject before we come back to you on matters politics, Paul. Peter, your experience being a former Met Police detective, do you think London has what one would call no-go zones?
Well, we've got to be very careful with our language because
Don't be.
because only this week the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, you know, the head of the police in London, was a bit upset with some hurty words. You know, yeah, the Prime Minister upset him with his speech last Friday, and it all cuts across these two-tier policing accusations, which are made very often with considerable justification. But to answer your question, yes, we can get on the tube train outside of here, and I can take you to many places in London that for others of a less robust character than us would most definitely be no-go areas.
Thank you.
There you go, Paul. Consider yourself vindicated. Can we just ask, you're stepping down at the next election.
You will be missed, Paul.
And now that lesser politician that few people will remember, that will always remember you, but Theresa May is also stepping down. Your assessment of Mrs May. A lot of us who were keen on Brexit didn't like her shenanigans during that phase, but factor that into your assessment.
Yeah, look, I mean, Theresa, I've known for a long time. I remember I was a chairman of a local association when she was chairman of the National Party. You were referring to that period a few years ago. And she's long served. She is really the epitome of public service, because when she was doing all of her jobs, she was still door knocking in her Maidenhead constituency pretty well every Saturday. And she's always going down to the minutiae. I remember one time I had a career limiting PMQ when Sutton United in my constituency had a really good FA Cup run, and I was asking her to congratulate them for beating AFC Wimbledon. Unfortunately, I forgot that she had been a Merton councillor and was a big fan of AFC Wimbledon, so she wasn't joining me in on that. But look, the time that she had as Prime Minister, tricky times there. I think Parliament lost its head. It wasn't just the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. Parliament for 2 years basically just sat there and squabbled, made up the rules as they went on. And I think it wasn't the Brexit decision that was key. It was the 2 years of psychodrama afterwards that allowed Michel Barnier just to sit there, cross his arms and say, come back when the grown-ups are back.
Very good analysis.
Just a last question, if you don't mind. By the way, you're talking to a former chief reporter of the Sutton and Cheam Herald here, so I know your area. A lot of Tories are stepping down at the next election. I mean, it's like an exodus. I mean, you know, there are lots of problems the Tories have got coming up towards this next election, as you well know. But what about the exodus? I mean, that in itself is a trouble, is it not?
Yeah, it is. It is. Look, it's been an exhausting 9 years. I came into this as an accidental MP. I didn't want to travel around the country to be an MP for the sake of it. I represent my home area. They're called home for 35 years. And I'm, not going to be part of the long-term solution. I've never wanted to retire in my 80s shuffling around the Commons. So, I want to go off and do something else at some point. So better to go off and do that. But I will still play a part. I will still comment. I will still want to have my views because after 25 years or so of being a member and doing every level of this, I think I've learnt the lessons of 97, and I think we've got to quickly learn those lessons now so we don't go through that same thing again and not be listened to for a decade after this election if we get it wrong.
Paul, fantastic
It's
to
been a
talk
pleasure
to you.
speaking
Fantastic.
to you.
Thank you very much for your time.